Hey, what is going on everyone? It's me, Mr. Mario, and in this video here we are revisiting the PlayStation 4 on a different firmware because yes, the PlayStation 4 has officially been jailbroken yet again, working up to firmware version 9.00. We're going to be taking a look at the POOB S4 PlayStation 4 jailbreak, and this is going to be for anybody who already has a jailbroken PS4 and you're wanting to update to this later jailbreak, or if you have a system on a compatible firmware, which is going to work. Now let's get a few things out the way. First of all, this will work on any PlayStation 4 model. That means the original PlayStation 4, the PlayStation 4 Slim, as well as the PlayStation 4 Pro. You do, however, need to have a PlayStation 4 running firmware 9.00 or lower. So if you have the successor update to it being anything 9.03 or higher, you cannot follow along with the rest of this tutorial. If you want to check your firmware version, you can simply go up to Settings, go all the way down to System, go into System Information, and right here you want to look for the System Software. If it says anything higher than 9.00, unfortunately this tutorial is not going to work for you. However, if you're on firmware 9.00, you're good to go. And if you're on a lower firmware, well, you're going to have to get updated to firmware 9.00. Many people also ask if it's possible to downgrade their PlayStation 4s, and the short answer to this is no. The long answer to this is you can technically revert the firmware of your PlayStation 4, but that is a much harder process, requires some specialized hardware, dumping a few things on the PlayStation 4 itself, and really at this point, if you have a fully updated PlayStation 4, and you're asking about that process, you're not familiar with it, it's too late for that console. So you would need to go out and get another PlayStation 4 on the new or used market on firmware 9.00. So just keep that in mind. If you're on a higher firmware, you're not going to be able to downgrade to this firmware directly. And lastly, many people ask about PlayStation Network access. We will be accessing the internet for this modification. However, this cannot hit PlayStation Network. Due to this being an outdated firmware, you will not be able to access PlayStation Network, use PlayStation Network, sign into PlayStation Network. You will not have PSN access on this console. Now, with all those disclaimers out the way, what are we going to need to get started on this jailbreak? Because it is slightly different. First of all, you still need your PlayStation 4 console as shown right here. You're also going to need it to be on a compatible firmware, so firmware 9.00 or lower. You are going to need internet access. Even though we're not going to be using PlayStation Network, you will still need internet access for this. And the last thing you're going to need, which is going to be different than any of the other jailbreaks I've covered for the PlayStation 4, is you will need a USB flash drive. You need one dedicated to the PlayStation 4. And I do want to stress this here, you need a separate USB drive. So if you already use one to transfer files back and forth between a PlayStation 4, that's not going to be it. You need another USB drive on hand because we're essentially going to sacrifice this USB drive and use it only as a device to boot up custom firmware on the PlayStation 4. I will show it later in the video, but just keep that in mind. Really, you don't even need anything expansive on there. Just get the cheapest USB drive you can find, whether it's even like 512 megabytes, 1 gigabyte, 2 gigabyte, just the smallest or cheapest USB drive that you can find, and use that only for booting up custom firmware on your PlayStation 4. So with all that here, for anybody who already has a jailbroken PlayStation 4 on a lower firmware, let's go ahead and get those updated. If you do not have a jailbroken PlayStation 4, but you still want to follow along with this, you can skip this portion and go right to either the Jailbreak Setup if you're on firmware 9.00, or you can follow along with the updating to 9.00 section if you're on a lower firmware. But first, if you have a jailbroken PlayStation 4, you'll know that it's jailbroken. You might be on firmware 5.05, 6.72, 7.02, 7.55. If you're on firmware 6.72, 7.02, or 7.55, I would recommend updating. If you're on firmware 5.05, that's still going to be a bit more stable than this, so it's really going to be up to you. But most people are recommending staying on that lower one. But 6 and 7 firmwares, you should just go ahead and update. For this process here, I am going to highlight PS4 exploit host because this is what you can use now, or if you have another preferred host, you can use that, or we're going to use this later on in the video. Now I'm showcasing this here because some people might have blocked updates on their system. So you need to unblock updates in order to update to firmware 9.00. The link for PS4 exploit host will be linked down below in the description of this video, but you can simply come down here and find the 2 IP addresses you need. Now these really haven't changed for years, but I still manually point this out because this could always change in the future, so just refer to the GitHub page here and keep these 2 IP addresses in mind. With that all in place, we can go ahead and set up the DNS server. So we can go over to settings, go down to network, make sure that you are connected to the internet. If not, we're going to get you connected. So you can go down to set up internet connection, whether it's Wi-Fi or LAN. I'm going to use a LAN cable. So for this, we're going to do custom, regardless of which one you do. Automatic is fine, do not specify is fine. DNS settings, we want this to be manual. And these are the 2 DNS settings that you can add here. Now, as you can see, the first one is 165.227.83.145. The second one is 192.241.221.79. So once you have those added, as long as you verify everything is there on the GitHub page, you can test the internet connection. It should connect out just fine. And at this point, we're good to go. So now what we can do is come back here, go over to settings, go to user's guide yet again. And once this loads up, we're going to have to go to the section specific for your firmware. Now you will have to check and see which firmware you are on, but for example, if I am on firmware 7.55, I would go over to PS4 7.5 to 7.55, go inside of here, and you're going to want to run the enable updates payload. So go ahead and run that first, let it go through the process. That is in case you have a jailbroken PS4 and you have previously run the disable updates payload on it. So once that is all set up on here, we can exit out of this and we can continue on with actually updating to 9.00. I'm not going to show loading that payload here because my system has already been updated, but just run that payload if it applies to you and make sure it runs successfully. So now if you're on a lower firmware, and again, you can go ahead, come up to settings, go all the way down to system information, and if you are on a firmware lower than 9.00, we need to get your system updated. It's pretty simple to do. For this step, you're going to need a second USB drive on hand. The first USB drive, again, this can be the smallest or cheapest or both USB drive that you can find, and dedicate that one later in the tutorial to using as a boot device for the PlayStation 4's custom firmware. This second drive can be a bigger drive, and the second one we're going to be using to transfer files and such on here. You will have needed a USB drive in previous systems, but this time around we're going to need 2 of them because yet again, one of them is going to stay stationary on the PS4. But for this, go ahead, grab a second USB drive that you are going to be using to transfer files and go over to a PC. I'm going to have a link to the Softpedia download for firmware 9.00, and in order to download this, you can simply click on download now, and then you want to download the upgrade file. Do not download the reinstallation file, download the upgrade file. So you can click on here and let it download. And it's even mentioning right here, if the download never starts, you will have to right click right here where it says click to start it manually and click save link as, and save this somewhere you can easily find it. Now I already have the update file right here. It's going to be ps4 update.pup, and we're going to have to transfer it to a USB drive. For this step, go ahead, plug in your USB drive that you're going to use to transfer files, and we're going to make sure that this is the right format. You can check this by going to right-click, Properties, and make sure that this is exFAT for the file system. It could be exFAT or FAT32, but for the PS4, let's use exFAT. In case you have to set this up properly, we can just right-click, go to Format, and then select exFAT on here. Default allocation size is fine, quick format is fine, and then hit Start. Now before you do this, this is going to erase any data that you care about on this USB drive. So if you have anything you care about on here, make sure you back it up. Once it's backed up, if applicable, go ahead, hit Start, OK, and there we go. So now we can close out of here, and we're going to transfer over this update file. You can go to the USB drive, and right-click, create a new folder, one word, all caps, call it PS4. And inside this PS4 folder, we need to create a new folder yet again, all uppercase and one word, update. Inside of our update folder, we need to copy over the PS4 update.pup file. Depending on how fast your drive is, just go ahead, give this a few seconds or a few minutes to transfer over. And there we go, it should be all copied over. To make sure that this is named properly, if you're using Windows, make sure you go up to View and enable file name extensions. It needs to look exactly like this. So starting back here, in our USB drive there needs to be a PS4 folder. Inside that folder there needs to be an update folder, and inside the update folder it needs to be PS4 update.pup. But there's one more step we should do here to make sure that this update is safe. I'd recommend checking the hash for this. This will just take another few seconds here, and this is just to make sure you did not download a corrupted update, and you're also downloading the firmware 9.00 update specifically. So this is what you can do. You can go ahead, click on Choose File, navigate over to your USB drive, not where you downloaded the file previously, but the USB drive itself. Go into PS4, Update, PS4 update.pup, and give this a few seconds to check the MD5 hash. Now, if you go down to the description of the video, I am going to put down the MD5 hash for this firmware. So what you can do is copy that out, paste it right here, and hit compare. Now keep in mind, if there's a space or anything before or after this, you might get a red X, but if this matches up completely and perfectly, you should get a green check mark, and that means you're good to go. This is a complete non-corrupted download for firmware 9.00. This is the exact hash it needs to be. If that's the case, you can simply right-click, eject your USB drive, and move it over to your PlayStation 4. Over at the PlayStation 4, plug in your USB drive with the update file copied over to it. Go over to Settings, go all the way down to System Software Update, and then apply the System Software Update. Now I'm going to splice in some footage here from an older update, simply because that is what was used prior. It's the same process, and I don't need to re-update this system with 9.00. However, just go through the process here of letting the update file copy over to your drive. Make sure the system reboots, applies the update, and then reboots yet again into firmware 9.00. And here you go. Once your system software is updated, you should be all good to go. And you can double check that your system software has been updated by going over to Settings, go all the way down to System Information, and your system software should now say 9.00. So you're at the exact point you need to be in order to continue jailbreaking your PlayStation 4. At this point, we are all ready to continue jailbreaking our PlayStation 4. So make sure you have your PS4 on firmware 9.00, make sure that you can connect to the internet, and finally, choose out your sacrificial USB drive. You can always revert to what we're going to do on there, but the reason why I'm saying this is because this USB drive that you pick out and continue with is only going to be usable for booting up custom firmware and other payloads on your PlayStation 4. So choose your USB drive wisely. You don't want to pick like a huge USB drive you have if that's one that you regularly use. Just pick, a smaller USB drive you don't care about. It's going to be a very small file that we need on there. However, with all of that being said, go ahead, grab your USB drive, and move over to the PC. The links for everything here will be down below in the video description, but the first thing we're going to need is we're going to need to look at the pub s4 jailbreak. So the GitHub repository will be linked down below, and there is one file we need right here. Now, of course, you can also look at the README summary and just read how this works, and it's a pretty quick read, so I'd recommend checking this out and checking out the notes as well too. Most notably, how it might look like the system is freezing, but it's not going to. Occasionally, even if it does, you just have to unplug the system, plug it back in, and also when to insert the USB drive and when to remove it. You don't want to keep this USB drive plugged in all the time, but what we can do is come up here, go to xfathacks.image and click it. Now click download. This is only a 4 megabyte file, and make sure you can download it somewhere you can easily find it. Next up, at least on Windows, we're going to need to flash the image file onto a USB drive, so I'm going to use Win32 Disk Imager. Click on this, it's going to download an executable, which you can use to install. So here we go. These are the two files we need, exFAT image and Win32 disk imager. If you don't have this program already, we can go ahead and work on the install process. Say yes if this comes prompting, and at this point, just go ahead, accept the agreement, continue on. I have it already, but I'm going to reinstall it. Once it has been installed, we can go ahead and launch Win32 disk imager. Now for this, you're going to want to open up Windows Explorer, and you want to find which USB drive you're using. So this is the one I'm going to use. I know this one is complete overkill, but this is just a drive I have on my desk here. So this is my 32 gig flash drive. It is letter J. That's exactly what we're going to need. And any Windows like this, we're going to need to close out of. Next up on Win32 disk imager, for device, we're going to pick which one it is. This is very important. You do not want to overwrite the incorrect device here. So I know J is my USB drive, and for here, click on this folder and find the image file. Once exFAT.image has been loaded up, we're going to click on write. Now yet again here, it is going to prompt us, are we sure we want to continue on? And just like before, if you have any data you care about on this USB drive, it is going to be wiped clean. So make sure you back up any data you care about. And once you are all ready to format this drive, we can say yes. And that's all there is to it. So we can now exit out of this. You should now notice that your USB drive is about 4 megabytes in size. That is expected. That is completely fine. And again, this drive, just make sure you note it down, keep it on hand somewhere. This is only going to be usable for booting up our payloads for this exploit on the PlayStation 4. So once this is all done, we can right click and eject this USB drive, and we don't need it again here. Now the last piece to get this up and running is we are going to need an exploit host, meaning we're going to need some way to run the exploit and push a payload to our system. And the one that I typically recommend and have recommended for the last few years is Azif's PS4 exploit host. Now the link will be down below in the description for this, and the GitHub page for this, you can just come over here. Of course, read up on this, but you're not going to need to download anything from here. Instead, we're going to be looking for a set of IP addresses. So you can come down over to using remote DNS, go to step number 1, and you're going to want to find the primary and secondary DNS servers. Now these have not changed in the last few years, but I always highlight this in case they do. So always refer back to the GitHub here, but make sure you have these pulled up on a screen or you note these down. Just keep these two IP addresses in mind. And now we should be all good to go over to the PlayStation 4. So go to your PS4, make sure you have these IP addresses on hand, and make sure you have your USB drive on hand, but do not insert it yet. I'm going to tell you exactly what to do with that USB drive. So over at the PlayStation 4 here, preferably don't have any USB storage on hand. We've already applied the update, so we don't need that other drive anymore, but we're going to need to set this up on your system, the DNS server. So you can come up here, go to settings, go down to network, go to set up internet connection, and you can use either Wi-Fi or a LAN cable. It doesn't matter which method you're going to use as long as it works for you, but you're just going to need to set a manual DNS server. So for this, pick your method. I'm going to use LAN. Go to custom, this is important. Now you can choose automatic, do not specify is fine. For the DNS settings, you want to choose manual. And in here, you're going to enter the primary DNS from Azif's PS4 exploit host. It's currently 165.227.83.145. And the second one you want to use is 192.241.221.79. Exactly like that for the both of these. You can hit next, automatic is fine, we don't need a proxy server, and then you can test your internet connection, and both these should ring successful. Now once all that is done, you're going to want to exit out of here, and we want to go back to settings, go to the user's guide, and wait. Now what's going to happen is it will redirect the user's guide, it's going to cache this theme, and at this point we have the exploit host working. Now the reason why I also recommend this is because setting those DNS servers actually blocks Sony and PlayStation servers, so you're not going to reach out to them and you shouldn't pull an update from their servers. That's the nice thing about it. So what we can do is go over to PS4 9.00. And in the future, this page might change here, but currently there's a bin loader and gold hin. Gold hin is exactly what we need, and it's what most people are going to want for their jailbroken PlayStation 4. In the future, depending on specific use cases, you might want to use like a Mira payload, for example, but for most people, gold hin is going to be just fine. With that being said, this is exactly how you're going to run the exploit. You're going to want to press the X button on gold hin, and you're going to want to keep your USB drive on hand and insert it at a specific time. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to press X, and it's going to begin loading the exploit. At this point here, it looks like your PlayStation 4 has frozen. It has not. This is expected. Do not touch anything here. Just let it do its thing. Now you should get a message like this saying insert USB now. And you have to do exactly what it says. Take that USB drive that you just flashed the image onto and insert it into the PlayStation 4. After a few seconds, it should give you that unsupported error message as a notification and wait for it to disappear. Once it disappears, unplug the USB drive. Once it's been unplugged, you can press OK. It should say you're all set, and check it out, gold hin has loaded. And that is it. You have now jailbroken your PlayStation 4. It was as easy as that. There's a few ways that you can check it. First of all, you can go up to Settings, and the top here should have a new setting called gold hin. If you go in here, you can enable FTP server. There is an experimental bin loader server so far if you want to load additional payloads without having to go through the DNS. There is a package installer, so you don't have to go through debug settings. And there's also an about section where you can check out some more things here. And for example, on about gold hin, these are all the features that it currently has, which is a lot of what we're really looking for right here with our system. So this is great. Now we can also go back, and if you scroll all the way down, you're going to notice something new called debug settings. And for the most part, you really don't want to mess with this. The most you'll have to mess with is when you're installing package files, which are going to be your games and applications. You can go in here, go into game, package installer, and you'll be able to install package files from a USB drive. But I don't recommend really touching anything else in here. And lastly, you can also go to System, you can go to System Information, and inside of here, it should say hin 9.00, as well as gold hin 2.0b, if that's the one you're using. It will probably be incremented here in the future, but those are just a few places that you're going to find this if you're specifically using gold hin. So there we go. Now, additionally, you're also seeing many of these games on here that I have, and these are all like fake package files. That's what they are referred to. That's what they're called. And I'll go ahead and boot up, let's say, Extermination, for example. This is a PlayStation 2 game that's not available on PlayStation Network. I had built out this myself. I had ripped it from the disk, built out the package file, and if we launch it here, we should be able to get it to boot up and play and everything. So previously, this was not able to work. If I tried this without running the payload, it would not have worked. However, at this point, the game is booting just fine. This is a PlayStation 2 game which is being emulated on the PS4. Just all that right here. And if you're interested in checking that out, I do have a specific video or two covering this if you want to take your PS2 games and convert them to run on the PlayStation 4. So here we go, we have everything up and running. This is great. We're not really going to be playing anything here, but mind you, it boots up, it works, it's all good. Now at this point, there's a few other things that we can do with the PlayStation 4. So first of all, if you want to know how to install things, that's pretty basic, something you'll need to know. These are going to be package files, and this will require, at minimum here, a USB drive. So yet again, the USB drive that you just used to jailbreak your PlayStation 4, you only want to dedicate that to running the payloads and jailbreaking your PS4. You do not want to use that for transferring files back and forth. That's where we're going to need our main USB drive, which will be for transferring our files. So we can go ahead, go to the computer, and I'll show you how that's done. Now, once you have your USB drive that you'd like to use to transfer files, you can check this and make sure that it is compatible. First of all, you can plug it in, right click, go to properties, and the file system we want to use is exFAT. You could also use FAT32, but for larger files bigger than 4 gigs, just so we can have that compatibility, let's use exFAT. So for this, in case you need to set this up, make sure you back up any data you care about from this USB drive because we will be formatting it. If you have to format it, at least here on Windows, right click, format, exFAT, default allocation is fine, quick format is fine, and we can format that. And there we go. So at this point here, installing any package files is really easy. You just want to take your package file from your app or your game, whatever it is. For this, I have Nightmare Creatures that I converted over to a fake package file. And you can copy and paste it over to the root of this USB drive. Just like that. Give it a few seconds or a few minutes to transfer over. Once the file has transferred over just to the root of the USB drive, we can go ahead, right click, eject, and move the drive over to our PS4. On the PS4, plug your drive in. Now go up to settings, make sure you have already run GoldHen once while the PS4 has been booted, and you can either come up to GoldHen and package installer, or you can go over to your settings, go all the way down to debug settings, game, package installer, and it's right there. However, just for convenience sake, I'm just going to do it through the GoldHen menu. Now you'll come over to package installer, and we only have one package here. If you have a series of them, you'll have like an install all option. But if you're just installing one, or if you just want to choose to install one, you simply select it. It's going to say add it to downloads. That's just how it loads everything. And then wait a few moments. And there we go. It should say ready to use. And at this point, look at that. We now have Nightmare Creatures on the PlayStation 4. So let's go ahead and launch this. Again, this is a PlayStation 1 game, and I do have a video covering this as well too, if you're interested in taking PlayStation 1 games and converting them over to work on the PlayStation 4 just on the menu like this. It's a nice little feature to have. I will say that emulation is not the best for PlayStation 1 or even PlayStation 2, but it's just really cool having this on the PS4 nonetheless. So there we go. That is how you can install a package game or a package file. This will work for games, this will work for emulators, this will work for applications. As long as you have a package file, you'll be able to install it using this method. Now what we can do is come over here. I'm going to close out of this application, and let's take a look at a few other things. Now one thing to note is that this is not a permanent jailbreak. So whenever you turn off your system and do a cold boot, you have to re-jailbreak your console. Now you can utilize rest mode, for example, like I'll do it right here, and rest mode might or might not work. I know it's gotten better, but if you go down to power and into rest mode, let's give this a shot. So here we go, I'm pulling the system out of rest mode. Let's see if this is working. There we go, got my controller to sync up, and check this out, everything's still looking fine. If I go over to settings, GoldHen is loading up, that's good. So all that's showing up here, and I can launch, let's do Twist Metal 2. All of my fake package games are working on here. So this is great so far. So you can utilize rest mode if you want to, and that will save you the process of re-jailbreaking. However, what happens if you turn off your system completely, or you run into a situation where, well, I'll show you right here, we'll turn off our system and turn it back on. So here we go, we're turning on our system from a cold boot, and this is something you might experience. Let's say you want to play one of your favorite games, and you notice they're locked, but not only that, they just won't boot up. So can't use content, let's try Mega Man Legends 2. Same thing right here, can't use content. Let's try a PlayStation 4 game itself. Let me actually find one here, Hotline Miami. There we go. So as you can see, all of these games I cannot use. Well, that is because you have to re-jailbreak this on every cold boot. Again, this is not a permanent jailbreak. So currently the system is in a stock state, but this is what you'll need to do. Once you have everything set up, just like we did before, you have to go over to Settings, User's Guide, and in here, go over to 9.0 and go to GoldHen. Load this up, and just like before, we're going to wait for the message to pop up, prompting us for our USB drive. Once this pops up, you'll plug in your booting USB drive, the one that we flashed. So now that's been inserted, we're just going to wait for the notification to pop up. There we go. It says the file system is unsupported. At this point, you now need to physically remove the USB drive and press OK. And there we go, Goldhin has loaded. Now it's also really important that you unplug your USB drive as well at that moment. So whenever you have to run a payload like that, you will have to, like from an exploit host, you will have to plug in and unplug that USB drive. Just always keep it on hand, but don't keep it plugged in all the time. However, the cool benefit is we should now have Goldhin again. We have it up top there, and we should be able to boot up our games. So Hotline Miami did not work, but check it out. We're able to load this up, it's able to work and boot up just fine. That's awesome. Now, one other thing many people have asked before is, do I have to be online all the time to enable this? And the answer is no, but you will have to cache this menu. And this is what you can do. First of all, we can come up here, go to settings, go over to our user's guide, and user's guide yet again. Go over to PS4 9.0, and you want to hit cache all. What it's going to do is it's going to save these in your browser itself. So once that's all done, we can press the PlayStation button. Now we can go over to settings, go to network, and I'm going to physically disconnect from the network. So I'm going to disconnect like that. At this point, I will not be able to hit the internet here at all. And I'm going to restart my PS4, which is going to remove the jailbreak here, and I will have to re-jailbreak in a few seconds. Now our system has booted back up. As you can see, my games are locked. My games are not going to boot up, but more importantly, if we try to check this out here, we can go over to our settings, go to network, and we are not connected to the internet, clearly. However, what we can do is we can still go to the user's guide yet again, and this is cached offline, meaning that we have access to Goldhin. So you can just go ahead, load up Goldhin as usual, and wait. It might take a bit, but it's now going to prompt us for the USB drive, which you need to insert. And there we go, we got our unsupported notification. Once that disappears, you need to remove the USB drive. And now press OK. It should say you're all set, Goldhin is loaded, and there we go. We are completely offline. However, we are able to now boot up our games. We're able to go to settings. Goldhin is showing up right there. I mean, this is all good to go at this point, and on top of that, we're still not connected to the internet. I'll go ahead and re-enable that right there, but that is how you can do that. Now there's many times here that the user's guide might get updated, the PS4 exploit host itself, and it is updated on the server side. So that could mean that things have changed to make the exploit better. There might even be more options here, just different payloads and such that you can use. And whenever that happens, you will have to manually clear out your cache. Azif normally makes a tweet about this on their Twitter, but just so you can check this out and so you can do it for yourself, if they ever say they made an update and you'll need to clear out your cache and cookies and all that, this is how you do it. You go ahead, go to your internet browser. This time around, we're going to press the options button, stop loading. Now we can go to close window and hold circle to close everything. At this point, we can go to press options again, delete all, hit OK, press options, go to settings, delete cookies, clear website data, and you can even go to browsing history, press options yet again, clear browsing history, and there we go. We have completely wiped out our settings on the browser itself. So now, if you want to take in that updated host, you can go to the user's guide, and when you come here, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to cache the theme, and that should bring in any updates. And you also might have noticed as well too, if you don't want to go to the user's guide every single time, you can also just open up the web browser, and by default, it's going to try to go to the PlayStation site and it will redirect you here. So it's just whichever option you'd like to choose. I personally like to go through the user's guide, but that's just me. There's also the ability to block firmware updates. Now, typically on here, at least at the time I'm recording this, there is usually a payload like right here. Let's say, like for example, there is like a disable updates payload that's not currently here at the time I'm recording this, and you might see a disable updates payload that's typically pretty good to run. So if you're able to successfully run these, you'll also want to run that disable updates payload when you can. And that's another thing as well too. Even though I was looking here, you only want to run payloads for 9.00. You cannot run these other version payloads. So just make sure you're only running things for 9.00. Now, another nice benefit with having this DNS server set up is when you go to settings, we can go to our network and just check it here. So going into custom, checking all of this. These two DNS servers and these settings that Azif provides, yet again, I will state here that these block traffic to the PlayStation and Sony servers, so you will not automatically or accidentally download a system firmware update on here. However, there's also one more step that you can take as well too. If you want to block that, you can go to System. This is kind of a hidden one here. It's not as obvious as it should be. System, Automatic Downloads, and you want to disable System Software Update Files. You could disable all three, that's what I do here as you can see, but when you disable System Software Update Files, if there's a new update, it's not going to automatically download it. So that is what we're trying to prevent. Finally, what if you want to get your USB drive back? Again, we've been using this USB drive to boot up our payloads, boot up our custom firmware, HIN, whatever you want to call it, every single time. But what if you want to revert that USB drive back for whatever reason? Well, for our final portion here, I'm going to show you how to do that. If you're using Windows, plug in your USB drive and you're going to want to find which one it is. Mine is J, and as you can see, it's called exFAT hacks. Keep that in mind. You can look up create and format disk partitions and open this up. Now, once your disk management comes up, you can also look up disk management. You're going to want to scroll and find your USB drive. Mine is this one right here that's called exFAT_hacks. And for this, you just want to right click it. You can do format, FAT32 or exFAT, whatever you want to do. Quick format is fine on here. Hit OK, hit OK, and that should be all done. It really doesn't prompt you there. We can now exit out of this. And if we come back over here, check this out. This has now been set up, so it has about 29 gigabytes. Really, we got our 32 gigabytes back. So we have about 29 gigabytes available as opposed to about 4 megabytes. And that is how you can revert your USB drive back to its original factory state. So there we go. That was a lot of information all in one, but that is about all there is to it for the PlayStation 4 9.00 jailbreak. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope it really helped out. If it did, a like would absolutely be appreciated. If you did not like this, a dislike is fine as well too. And if you're wondering what else you can do with your jailbroken PlayStation 4, well, there's a few other videos that are here on the channel. If you're wanting to take your disc-based games and convert them into fake package files so you can play them without the disc, like I'm doing with Hotline Miami right here, yeah, it did get a limited pressing release. It was kind of an import, but I had that on disc, dumped it, showed it off here. You can do that. If you want to play PlayStation games, PlayStation 2 games, I've got videos for that as well too, and I'm probably going to be making some more videos on this overall, because the nice thing is 9.00 is so much more stable. It is so much more stable than 6.72 and especially 7.02 and 7.55. That's why I've kind of been missing from the PS4 for a bit, but you know what? We have a good firmware right here. We have a really awesome jailbreak, and this is all great. With that, I do also want to say a specific big thank you and shout out to the developers of this Pube S4 jailbreak. That would be Laurie, Spectre, ChindoChap, and of course Z Null Pointer. It's really awesome that we were able to get this, and it is a very awesome implementation and super stable, so pretty much what everybody was wanting here. Anyways, that is about it for this video here. This is Mr. Mario, Signing off real this time. Later, everyone.